Perhaps I should explain here why the poet feels that the prison cell, despite being a cruel place, is a haven, or why the grave is an absolute haven, though it signifies the end of human existence. Well, the Biafran War devastated the southern part of Nigeria, the eastern part of Nigeria. The Biafran War resulted in 100,000 military casualties, 2 million starvation deaths, 2 million Biafran starvation deaths, and caused the displacement of 500,000 Biafrans. No wonder the poet thinks that the prison cell is a haven and that the grave is an absolute haven. The casualties are not only those who started a fire and now cannot put out. The poet seems to admit that the Nigerians have themselves to blame, have only themselves to blame for the colossal tragedy that has now enveloped their country. The Biafran War was a made in Nigeria war. Though we can trace the root cause of the Biafran War to colonialism, ultimately the blame for the war, for the catastrophe that was the war, has to be borne by the Nigerians themselves. The poet says the casualties are not only those who started a fire and now cannot put out. It is easy to start a fire, and the fire may become a forest fire. But once you start a fire, it quickly goes out of your control. This is precisely what happened in the case of the Nigerian Civil War. And the greatest sufferers of the war were the ordinary people. Thousands and thousands were burnt by the fire of the war, and they had absolutely no say in the matter. The poet admits that there are some who are escaping from the fires of the Nigerian Civil War, but he thinks that the casualties are not only those who are escaping. His definition of the word casualty is so expansive, so vast, that it includes all these categories and is capable of accepting more such categories. Now we come to the concluding lines of the first stanza. The shattered shall become prisoners in a fortress of falling walls. These are among the most brilliant lines written by John Pepper Clark Becky Derrimer. At first blush, they do not seem to mean much, but a careful analysis is capable of convincing us that the lines capture with passion, with precision, with power, that the lines brilliantly capture exactly what is happening in Nigeria, exactly what is happening in Biafra now. And what is taking place in Biafra now? What do we find in Biafra now? Devastation, demolition, destruction, annihilation, imprisonment, subjection, repression. And the lines operate as a kind of objective correlative for what is taking place in Biafra. The shattered shall become prisoners. The shattered, the people are shattered. Physically, first of all. You must remember that 2 million Biafrans died of starvation. 500,000 Biafrans were displaced. The people are shattered physically, economically, culturally, politically, religiously, psychologically, morally, spiritually. The shattered. The shattered shall become prisoners. And what do they experience? They experience imprisonment, subjection, repression, exploitation, oppression. The shattered shall become prisoners. In where? A fortress of falling walls. The Biafrans are shattered and they are imprisoned in a fortress. But the fortress itself is falling walls. The fortress itself is collapsing walls. The lines operate as a kind of objective correlative for what is taking place in Biafra now. And what is taking place in Biafra now is complete devastation and absolute repression. At this point, I would like to bring into conjunction with the poem under consideration another iconic poem in African literature, perhaps an even more iconic poem in African literature, and that is Africa, My Africa by David Diop. I think you can also say Diop, but I prefer Diop. Both John Pepper Clark, Becky Derrimore in The Casualties, and David Diop in Africa, My Africa, love their land. But the difference is that the love of John Pepper Clark, Becky Derrimore is expressed in a very indirect, subtle, nuanced manner. The passionate concern that he has for his land shines through the lines of the poem, but the love is not expressed directly, it is expressed in a subtle, indirect, nuanced manner. On the other hand, the love of David Diop for his land is expressed directly and is encapsulated by the very opening line of the poem, which also serves as the title of the poem. And the line is Africa, My Africa.